Hey everybody, spoilers for all things Christopher Nolan and even some of John and Nolan's work like Westworld as well. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Script Department. I'm John. I'm joined today by Asim to talk about all things Christopher Nolan, and we'll be talking about Jonathan Nolan as well. We'll be looking at their films from a screenwriting point of view, mainly Christopher Nolan's work, but looking at what John Nolan has contributed to that as well. Before we get into that, if you haven't already, do check out our website, thescriptdepartment.net, for all the latest projects we get up to with our global network of screenwriters. You can follow us on social media, hit the links in the description, and do subscribe to our podcast as well, The Script Department, wherever you get your podcasts, for daily episodes like this and script readings as well. And give the YouTube channel a subscribe as well if you can. So, Asim, you and I, big Nolan fans. I think a lot of people have this huge fascination with Christopher Nolan. Let's jump right into this idea. We will talk about Oppenheimer, his new film, at the end, and we'll kind of talk about what maybe we can expect from that, or maybe what his previous films have taught us that, or what we've come to expect from watching his previous films. But before that, what is our obsession with Christopher Nolan? Why do we? I always remember at the MTV Awards years ago, he came out to a standing ovation because he was showing a trailer for the Dark Knight Rises, and he got a standing ovation from everybody. And I thought, that's so strange. You know, if it was Christian Bale coming out on that show, you'd think, sure, but it was the director. It was Christopher Nolan. It was the guy who probably, I don't get the impression he watches MTV or VH1 a lot, and here he is getting a standing ovation. It was like, and it's almost like, he's arrived. He's bigger than Spielberg now. He's bigger than, and so people really love his work. Mm-hmm. What is it about that, do you think?
I think one of the main things about Christopher Nolan is you don't see him too much talking in the media, and that's one of his quirkiness. And I like that because once he speaks, you already listen to him. And one of the things that I actually saw about him is how he explained his stories. His storylines and how he actually create these stories. They're not actually your typical way of it's a typical third act and three acts and all that. But when he explain it, it becomes like he's explaining something from physics. And this kind of complex storytelling and making you as the audience and also as even the actors to work on the script, to work on the characters more, to try to understand these things. This is what makes him unique in his storytelling wise. And I think that's the thing that a lot of directors start to lose in their way because they want just things for popcorn. They just wanted to go for the gizmos, for spectacles. And I think that thing wasn't in Nolan's perspective from the start. It's just came later on, very later on, after he established himself as a very successful, screenwriter and also director. But that came by time. It didn't come from the start. He didn't start with huge explosions and all that. He started with the characters. And I think his characters are what makes us so attached to his movies. We never had something like Batman Trilogy, and how people are starting to teach the trilogy. And I think you are actually one of them teaching the trilogy to your students, because how perfect it was written and how this character have a very good arc, and seeing it from the first movie to the second to the third one. Nothing had happened before the Batman, even in the previous Batman films, nothing happened before that. And that kind of very cut from life, very something that people can relate to. It's never been done before. Everything, I would say that all the Batman films before were much more adaptation of the comics and much more, I don't want to say childish, but it wasn't really going to the adult kind of stream. I think that's one of the main reasons for him. He wanted to explain to you that his characters are also similar to everyday to-day life, but also they have extra, punches, extra, things to do as well.
Yeah, it is very much characters, I think, that are, I think, at the core of his films. But I don't think he writes characters in the same way that um, I think other screenwriters and filmmakers might approach character design. I think his characters are very much there to serve the experience that he wants to take the audience on. And part of that is also through the structure of the film, part of that is also through the spectacle of the film. I think you or I might sit down and write a character, and audience be damned, in the beginning, let's just create great characters here, and then let's try and put them into a and we've talked about this actually in a previous video, and let's make sure that what we're giving the audience then is a great experience. It does feel that he's very much the opposite. He's very much, okay, I want to blow the audience's mind. What kind of characters do I need to serve that? And he'll create interesting characters, but it feels like it's always in service of the audience. It's less about wanting to explore. Oh, I wonder what this kind of I wonder what life in this role might be like. Which might be a kind of the reason why some writers might approach character. It's interesting because I think Oppenheimer, the about Robert Oppenheimer, the creator of the inventor of the atomic bomb, or one of the inventors of the atomic bomb. I think that's almost, it's strange because that's, I think, since Batman, that's like his first real character study. And when you look at his catalog, and then you look at, like, the idea that he made a series of Batman films as well, it is a bit strange actually, because you think, why would he do that? Like, it does feel a little at odds with the other types of movies he's made, not in terms of technique, but just in terms of the types of stories he's telling. And actually, when you think about what Batman is the greatest superhero character study, and he's jumped in on that. So I do think part of the appeal of Nolan and the fascination of Nolan is that audiences know they're going to have to work for their supper. They're going to have to, it's going to be a long film. It's going to be well worth the price of admission, no matter what your feelings of the film are. I don't think anybody comes away from a Nolan film feeling like, well, that was just terrible. I think they come away feeling it wasn't as good as Inception, or it wasn't as good as The Prestige, or something like that. But I don't think anybody comes away from a Nolan film thinking, well, that was just the worst thing I've ever seen. You are going to have to work, and you are going to have to be an engaged audience. I think that's one of the great things about Nolan is he respects the audience more than maybe any other filmmaker in that kind of level of Hollywood filmmaking. He is prepared to he will take huge risks, on the basis that the audience will go with me on this, and they will trust me, and they will follow along. They will be able to understand. And the studio, you can tell, and I think it was maybe more obvious now with Tenet, for example, you can tell that maybe studio executives are getting a little bit nervous about Nolan's films. Maybe just because, will we follow along this time, or is this the one that's going to be too complicated for audiences? And I would love to see the kind of the back and forth that goes on between, because he's not asking for $50 million to make a movie. He's asking for insane amounts of money every time, and those movies will make their money back. But if you're a studio executive, you've got to be a little nervous, and I would love to see the conversations that exist between Nolan and those studio bosses when they're having those conversations. Yeah.
I think also one of the things that makes him unique about him is that if we dissect his movies, in the bottom, it's actually based on a noir films. All his films are based on black noir, the old noir, the original noir, where your character is actually a facade. He's not the good guy, and I think that was so clear in Memento. I think this is where he started to take some kind of an appreciation about that. And if we go to The Dark Knight, if we go to The Prestige, every kind of film, for him, there's always a character who's searching for the truth, searching for something, and that doesn't come very easy. It's always the black noir, the old noir kind of films. That's in a nutshell. I mean, that's what makes his films about. You have to work your brain to understand what he's trying to tell you in this scene, what he's trying to connect with the scene number X. So I think that's one of the quirkiness about him, and I like that. I like that kind of details about his stories, and with his character, as you said, John, uh, a lot of the time they represent the theme itself. If you see it, or sometimes they represent an idea, like if we see Dent in the Dark Knight, when he said, you're long enough to become, either you die here or live long enough to become your villain. He is the momentum, he is that character who will become this. So it's like that theme is an embodiment of Dent as Two-Face. So, and his stories are the driving mechanism. It's not the characters, things come to the character and they push the character to go, but it's the story itself that forces them.
Which is, I think what's so interesting about that is, I think everything you've just described, very true. But I would see that in lots of different movies, right? The thing that I think is so interesting about Nolan's work is that Nolan's films are dressed up to appear as very complicated films that are very difficult to write and so on. Now, I don't know where he gets the ideas for some of his stuff. There are things in Tenet that just blow my mind. I will talk about Tenet in a bit, but there's just things there where I just think I can't think like Nolan, and I wish I could. But I think and this is absolutely not a criticism, because actually I think it's a strength. His stories are very, very simple and straightforward at the end of the day. They're very, very distilled. They appear far more complex than they are. But at their heart, they follow very, very simple screenwriting techniques, as you've described. You've got a theme and you've got a character that embodies that theme, and that's kind of just a very simple, straightforward way of exploring that. I think what's so interesting about Nolan is that his films don't feel like they're immediately accessible, right? When if I was to describe the running order of Inception, you would think, well, no one's going to get that, or Memento even, or anything like, how are you going to solve a case backwards, and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the accessibility of those characters and it's the accessibility of his techniques that allow audiences to be able to follow along. He knows that he's not using groundbreaking screenwriting concepts. He's not doing avant-garde approaches to character or story. He's just simply giving you, it's like he's read a screenwriting manual and he's applied all of that stuff, all of those basic kind of unspoken rules of want and need, A stories and B stories, 3-act structure, characters embodying functions that allow the theme of the story to be unfolded, all that kind of stuff. And then based purely on that, the audience is able to follow. And then he will wrap it up and he'll dress it up in this kind of, in this complex, seemingly nonlinear structure, seemingly what appears to be something that is a bit more complicated than you were expecting. Like Dunkirk, for example. Dunkirk has 3 different timelines happening. We've got 1 day, 1 week, and 1 hour. So 1 week, 1 day, 1 hour. But that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's just a group of people trying to survive. And that little complexity of the structure is just the icing on the cake. It doesn't change the recipe of the cake, and I think it's what allows the audience to be able to just follow Dunkirk seamlessly, no problem. Same with Inception, dream within a dream within a dream, but it doesn't matter because after a while you start to forget you're in a dream within a dream within a dream, and you're just we need to get out of this place, and now we got to get out of this place, and now we got to get out of this place. Just so happens they're all happening on different planes of existence, or whatever. So yeah, anyway, I think that's kind of why I think his audience, his audience is so receptive to his work and why his work is so accessible. I've always
Mhm.
felt that's the kind of the key. Really, is there is a simplicity to his work,
Yeah.
as you kind of described.
If we take, for example, his first one, which is Momentum, I think this is where he started to become like very noticed about his storytelling, and also that film was itself. You teach it for your students because on the way how it's been written and also what kind of timeline they're working. But if we dissect that movie just for a little bit, the black and white is actually a story going forward, and the color one is a story going backward. So it's like he's trying. And if you see it in a in a very linear order, it's so boring. But with the way it's been done, it becomes so much appealing. And not forget, Jonathan, his brother, who is the professional screenwriter. He is the guy who that are responsible about that short story that won awards. Then he took it and they made it into movies. And I think Christopher will never be successful if it wasn't for his brother. A lot of the scripts, a lot of the movies that he's working on, it's always with Jonathan. If we go to the Memento, if we go to the Prestige, if we go to Interstellar, if we go to Inception as well, and also the Dark Knight, there's also Jonathan is also with his brother all the time. I think what makes
Actually, just on that, sorry,
Mm.
I thought Jonathan Nolan actually wrote like everything with, but actually he hasn't. I think the last film, so he did Memento, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, then he did The Dark Knight Rises, and Interstellar was his last. That was the last one. He didn't. I thought he did Inception as well, but he actually didn't do that one.
No. I had the book Inception, and for the first 40 pages, it's a banter between Jonathan and Christopher on how he came with that idea, and Nolan stayed 10 years trying to write this idea. So every time
So,
he's
was Jonathan Nolan? He was deeply involved in the project, but
yeah
he's just not credited as the writer
no
on it.
no.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if we see that there's a lot of collaboration between them because Jonathan is a professional screenwriter and Chris is a professional director. So each one of them know what he's actually supposed to do. It's not like every one of them is wearing too many hats. Everyone is wearing his proper hat. That's why they're doing it in the right way. And I think what makes Nolan come to these scripts is adding his kind of flavor of a director and also how to make the scene work. Like, seems like you say it's complex, but it's in reality it's not actually a complex scene, but he shape it, he actually dress it up as a complex. And yeah, so what do you think about the Prestige?
I love The Prestige.
Um,
I I think, like most people, I've got a fascination with magic when it's done well, like great
yes.
illusions and magic. I think everybody does. When I was a kid, I used to have my little magic set and things like that. And was dreadful at it all. Um, but yeah, and I always thought, what we need is when I was a teenager, or whatever, I thought, why isn't there a great movie about magic? Because I always saw, even at a young age, I saw that parallel between cinema and magic, and that idea of misdirection and all that kind of stuff. Even before I really knew anything about story structure or storytelling techniques or filmmaking techniques or anything like that, I was very acutely aware of that idea of the promise of cinema as an illusion, as an illusionary act, and I think it's very fitting that Christopher Nolan has made a film. He's the one filmmaker, I think, that has, more than anybody in the last 20 years, instilled that idea in our minds again, that cinema is like magic. It is, the filmmakers are the modern magicians. No disrespect to magicians, but I just say, it's there are the ability to be able to make me so certain that that guy is the killer, and then over 2 hours make me believe it's that person instead. And then, oh no, it turns out I was right all along. But your misdirection was so brilliant that I completely changed my point of view. The idea that a film can change a person's political perspective, the idea that a film can make me feel like I'm going through this struggle or whatever. And even though I know it's all just illusion on the screen, that is modern magic for me, I think. So I think Prestige is his most personal film, actually, in that regard. It might not. I don't know how he feels about that, but I always get the sense that it's the film that makes the most sense to him. We always talk about, like, did Tenet make sense, or did you follow Inception, or that kind of thing. We tend to ask ourselves, did you get what was going on in Memento, that kind of stuff. We always tend to talk like that sometimes about Nolan's films, but I always wonder. To me, it feels like Prestige is the one that makes the most sense to him, because it's what he is. He is a modern magician. I love the film. I think it's absolutely incredible. I saw it a few times on DVD, and I think I saw it on television the first time it came out. I never got to see it in the cinema, but then in the Truro Plaza Cinema in Cornwall, beautiful cinema, very old school cinema. When I used to live in Cornwall, and Mark Kermode, the film critic, would do 35mm screenings there, and he did 2 Nolan ones. He did Dunkirk and he did The Prestige, and I went to both of them, and it was such a pleasure to be able to watch The Prestige in a big theater, beautiful theater. And it was a very old print of The Prestige, like this had been sitting in a library, in an archive somewhere. There was scratches on it and everything, and so it felt like I was watching something very it felt like I was really watching a classic, a really wonderful film. And it I don't think there's so much going on in that film, you don't fully appreciate just how genius the film is. I mean, it is just otherworldly levels of genius, I think. The way Christian Bale talks to his wife in certain scenes, depending on who he's playing, and I won't try to spoil too much of it, but there's something about Christian Bale's character that's not quite right, and the clues are coming forward. Clues are coming out. There's a line in it where his wife says, or he'll say, "I love you," and then she'll say, "But not. Sometimes you love me," or "Not today," or something like that. And it's like, okay, I'm seeing the evidence now. I'm seeing, okay, this is what's going on in this moment. You don't really notice that until you know the ending. And it's a deeply clever film. What was your experience? I mean, you love the film as well, I'm sure.
Man, I loved it so much because it is. I've been thinking about brothers. I always love things about brothers. I don't know why, but I think it's much more, as you said, it's a personal one because it's the only film, if you realize, it's the only film that has twins. And
Yeah.
I think it's a metaphor for
Here
him.
I am trying to avoid spoilers.
You
jump right in.
It's okay. I mean, I think it's like a metaphor for him and Jonathan. No one really knows who wrote the script, and if you see their
okay, yeah.
if you see their interviews, none of them is actually saying, "No, I wrote the script and he came after that." They don't say that. It's like
really?
It's like they're putting this kind of enigma. Okay, who is it? Not John? Is it Christopher? It's like that kind of enigma. But I like what they're trying to say about the techniques in terms of also using science with Tesla, and that was just one of the things that I think it's like a hint that Tesla already did that kind of invention, but where is it now? It's like he's trying to tell us something. And I like how, I mean, David Bowie, I respect him in that.
David Bowie is Nikola Tesla.
Wow.
He will
Yes.
always be Tesla to me.
Exactly,
you can make all the biopics you want about Tesla. It'll always be David Bowie. Always.
Man, he was so good. He was so good in that. And
Andy Serkis doesn't get enough credit either. He is incredible, and it's not just their performances. Those 2 characters are brilliant. He's like the Wizard of Oz. He's like, we've got to go find the wizard so he can give me the whatever. And and Hugh Jackman is on this quest to find him, and Andy Serkis is kind of fobbing him off, and it's brilliant. And the spectacle in that film, you go out into this, it's set in
the 1800s.
1800s London, and then he goes to America, and Hugh Jackman goes to America in search of something bigger or something better, and he goes to a small town. Excuse me. He goes to a small town, and there are just these light bulbs in the fields, just lit up, and it's incredible. It's just this incredible spectacle, this incredible idea. And then he goes to a hotel, and you can tell immediately, and this is my favorite part of the movie, is when he goes to that small town, and then you suddenly realize you're in the middle of a war between Edison and Tesla.
Yes.
And you never see Edison, but you see Tesla. And it's like, oh, Edison's men are here, or Edison's men have been coming around and disrupting and you just think, you've just introduced me to this whole other world and this whole other rivalry.
Yes.
Like, this is a film about a rivalry between two magicians, two people who are conjurers of magic and an illusion. And here are the other big illusionists of the world, Tesla and Edison, who have been able to harness this energy and have been able to do things that no one ever thought possible, and are doing the impossible. Like, science and magic should sometimes overlap,
Yes.
in our imaginations. And here's this other rivalry. You don't even think about the parallels between that. It's so well thought out, so well. And this is based on a book, by the way. So
Yes.
as much credit as, all the credit in the world to the Nolans. But I just want to find the author of the Christopher Priest's novel. I think deserves a lot of credit as well. But I'd be very interested to know actually how much of the book is in this story, because and how much isn't actually as well. But yeah, I love that. I love the film so much. I think it's such a powerful piece, and I think it's got his darkest ending. I'm trying to think now, but I can't think of another Nolan film that has such a twisted ending to it.
And it's ambiguous ending. Is he still? Is Jack Nickel? Is Jack? Is
Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman, is he really dead? Is it the real Hugh Jackman?
Okay, this came up in conversation. We're probably going a bit off topic. We could do a whole movie about The Prestige, a whole video about The Prestige at some point. But Hugh Jackman, he gets this device where he can duplicate his body. Is the Hugh Jackman that we see at the end of each show, is that the original one? Like the one that survives? So the idea basically is that Hugh Jackman is able to duplicate himself using this machine, which doesn't sound very good, does it, when you say it out loud? But actually it works really well in the film. And so what'll happen is he'll go into this machine on stage, and then he'll do the whole thing. He'll pretend he's being electrocuted or whatever, and then he'll disappear. He falls into a water tank underneath, and he dies. He drowns. On the other side of the stage, on the far side of the room of the theater, up in the balcony, the duplicate Hugh Jackman kind of comes out and goes, "Ta-da! Here I am. I've transported myself," and everybody just loses their mind. Is that... Okay, here's my question to you. Is the original Hugh Jackman dead by the end of the film? Or is it a double? Like,
that's the question. He actually, it's an open ending. You don't know if he's the real Hugh Jackman or is he the double, because
I wonder is that a something that just went unexplained, or is it actually... Because I get that it's ambiguous, but is it ambiguous because it serves the story, or is it ambiguous? It doesn't feel like it's ambiguous because it serves the story. It feels like it's ambiguous because they couldn't actually explain it. It does feel like Hugh Jackman decided, I need a device to be able to duplicate myself. Okay, the price of that is that I'm going to have to die.
Yes.
But my duplicate can continue to live on. has he has he is he as at some point has the original Hugh Jackman, who fell in love with this woman who died at the beginning, who's had this rivalry with Christian Bale, this guy who's had all of this this heartbreak and so on throughout the film, has he gone into a tank and drowned in your
I, th-
mind?
I don't think so, because if we see that there's this kind of philosophy about the first time Hugh Jackman used it and his double came out, the first thing he did, he's just shot him before even talking to him.
Yeah. You're right.
So he will never die. He doesn't allow himself to die. So the duplicates are the ones that's actually getting killed in the tanks. So I think the last one, which is
Okay, is he creating the duplicate before
yes,
the trick?
yeah, before the trick.
Oh, I think a lot of people, and because I'm not the only one who thinks this, because we had this conversation with Mark Kermode
Okay.
in that when he did his talk afterwards, and we couldn't figure it out as an audience,
Yeah.
and maybe it was very obvious and some people just didn't want to say it, but it was yeah. I think the assumption is that when you see the big magic, when you see the electricity from the machine and everything, you think, oh, that's the duplicate being created.
Yes.
But actually, no, he's creating the duplicate before the show. The duplicate comes on stage, goes into the tank, and then, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, you've actually fixed that. That's the only issue I ever had with that film, and you fixed it for me. So now it's a perfect film.
Yeah, the first, let's say, the first character that comes on the stage, which is a Hugh Jackman, that's the clone who gets the praises in the beginning, and he's the one who gets drowned. So he's underneath waiting for him to get drowned. Then he goes up. He's losing his audience. He's losing that kind of appreciation, that kind of eagerness to see the audience.
But one thing I love actually is, and it makes a lot of sense now when we've said it. Hugh Jackman does say, because because at one point in the film he does have a body double. Which is a bit silly actually. That's the only other issue I had with the film is there just happens to be this identical guy, this English Hugh Jackman, that just has this, and he's a drunk, and he's unreliable, and he works perfectly at the beginning, but then he becomes very unreliable, and he starts to blackmail them because he's actually the key to the trick working, and Hugh Jackman's biggest gripe is, oh, the body double is getting all of the praise. Like, I'm the one that has to stay in the dark and pretend I'm getting all the. And I think it speaks such volumes about Hugh Jackman's character in that film that he would rather sacrifice the whole set so that he can get the applause at the end. He'll let somebody else do all the magic. He's not in it for the magic. He's in it for the applause at the end. And I think that's such brilliant storytelling. Yeah.
But I love Hugh Jackman in that film. I mean, it's the first. I think it's the first. I don't want to say the last time that he will work with Nolan, but I think it's the only film that he worked with Nolan.
And I was going to say, I was going to say there are some actors he's never worked with.
Yeah, and Nolan always have this thing about if he likes a character or an actor, he will work with them. I think Christian Bale is one example. Then you have Michael Caine, and you have Anne Hathaway, and you have also who else? Those three are just also Morgan Freeman.
Has he worked with Anne Hathaway after Interstellar?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, Dark Knight Rises. Dark Knight Rises. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So I think with that, going with these kind of actors, I think he kind of had this kind of relationship with them. Oh, I can work with them. They're easy. I know how to do it. And people say that it's so hard to work with Christian Bale, but I think he managed to work with him for so long. For 4 films right now. So I
imagine Hugh Jackman is just the most lovely person in the world, and I don't understand why you wouldn't want someone like DiCaprio in every movie either, because he just is so exceptional in everything he does. but I do think Nolan has a very particular requirement of his cast, and I'm not talking about anyone's difficult or anything like that, but just I'd say Killian Murphy, somebody he works with a lot as well. We shouldn't forget.
Joseph, also the one who acted as the Robin in The Dark Knight, and he also
Joseph
with
Gordon-Levitt. Joseph
yeah,
Gordon-Levitt.
and
Yeah.
Tom Hardy as well.
Tom Hardy. Yeah.
As Payne, and also in Inception.
Yeah.
So I think
there are lots of actors he likes to work with. Dunkirk as well. Tom Hardy's in Dunkirk. There are lots of actors he works with. I would be interested to know why he hasn't worked with DiCaprio again. I mean, it's just, you would get all the money in the world if DiCaprio was in your film, Hugh Jackman as well. I mean, these people are just instant box office gold.
Yes.
Maybe it's because actually Nolan himself now is box office gold, and he doesn't. He can just work with the people. I do like that. In Dunkirk as well. He had a he had a cast of actors that wasn't just A-listers from top to bottom. Yes. Yeah, you've got the guy from One Direction in your film. It doesn't get much more A-list than that. But at the same time, he had actors that I can't tell you their names, but they steal the scenes, that they're in. So I think there's... Okay, so we will go from Prestige, right? I love Prestige. Inception, I think, is his greatest achievement as a filmmaker. Do you agree with that, or...
when you see Inception for the first time, it's like, okay, this is something I need to see it more than once to understand it. But the kind of storytelling and also the characters, I didn't feel for the characters at first. I felt with the story. It's just that story itself resembles so many times I have this nightmare when I have the fever. I'm inside a nightmare, inside a nightmare, inside a nightmare. I don't know if I'm still alive or I'm still in the nightmare. So I think that resonates so much with a lot of people, and this is what makes it maybe successful for a lot of reasons. But maybe when I saw it for the second or third time, this is where I start to connect with the characters more. And then the story.
Just on the dream, that kind of idea of connecting to the dream that you just said. When I was watching Inception, I'd only seen the trailer. Somebody, I think maybe my sister, had said, you got to go see this. This is great. And I think I hadn't. It was like the first weekend or whatever. I hadn't seen it yet, and I went to see it. And at the very beginning, you've got this. He's breaking into Ken Watanabe's home and trying to steal stuff and all that kind of stuff, and then Joseph Gordon-Levitt or somebody's like, okay, wake him up. And Leonardo DiCaprio is sitting on a chair over a bath.
Yes.
And they kick the chair into the bath. And they call it "give him the kick." I think that's what they call it. And then Tom Hardy demonstrates it to Joseph Gordon, to Elliot Page later on, where Elliot Page is saying, kick? What's a kick? And then Tom Hardy kind of just flips Joseph Gordon-Levitt's chair a little bit, and he's like, oh, and he kind of jumps a little bit and goes, that's a kick. And I love that line, because I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what that sensation is. We've all had that sensation where we're in it, where we're falling asleep, we're kind of dozing off, and then suddenly you kind of just jump in your sleep, right? Or you just kind of have that kind of moment of free fall or whatever it is. And I just thought, I completely understand everything in this movie, because you're using the rules of how we sleep. This idea of, you don't really remember how you got into the dream. You just remember being in the dream, but you can't remember how the dream started. And I'm like, yes, that's so true. No one has ever said that out loud to me before. Like, I'm thinking about my dreams in a way that I've never thought about them before, because not my dreams, but the mechanics of how I sleep. I'm thinking about that in a way I haven't thought about before. And you're turning them into plot devices. You're turning them into like weapons. You're turning them into, like, it's the equivalent of the ejector seat in a car, in a James Bond film or something. It's that let's get out quickly, kick him, that kind of thing. I just think there's so much I can talk about with that film. I won't go on. We'll save it for another video. But he does something that I've never seen any filmmaker do, and that is, he takes you on a journey that even Peter Jackson didn't do in Lord of the Rings. You know, it is layer after layer after layer, and I'm not just talking about the dream after dream after dream thing. It just doesn't stop. It's like, I'm gushing over the film.
I think while explaining to every new recruit what's the dream, how you create it, what kind of powers you have to do this, it's like, and every dream it becomes much more successful, much more harder. And when they went to that guy who's the driver, the Indian guy, and how he's explaining, okay, is he going to build that? You know, so it's like he understands the architect of building a dream that complex, that kind of hard, and if they die in it, then they will die in the real life. So there's consequences also.
I also love that, and I wrote a blog article about this years ago, which is I really think the key to this film is that he doesn't explain. And he doesn't over-explain how this stuff works. Like, Elliot Page is brought in to be an architect, to design, and they're building these structures, you know, out of modeling cardboard or whatever. And DiCaprio used to be an architect and all this. And you've got this silver suitcase that everybody gets plugged into, and then a big red button gets pushed, and you know, all that kinds of. There's no explanation as to, like, okay, so I'm going to design this building, but how do we upload that, so to speak? Like, does it get uploaded into the brain in some way? Or is there some magic technology here?
Yeah, they don't go into details.
No, and how is it that just because we're all plugged into this thing, I mean, are we all now plugged into an AI or something? You know, and I know it's kind of not how it is. The more I think about that stuff, the more I end up ruining the film for myself. And I don't mean that I'm actually ruining the film for myself. I just don't want to think about that. And in most films, I want to think about it. Like, I want to understand, how does this work? How does that work? With Inception, I don't want to know. I don't care. If Nolan sat in front of me, you know, at a dinner table or something, I would talk to him. He could say, do you want me to tell you how all this stuff works in my head? Like, how I figured out how all this stuff. And I'd be like, no, don't. Because it is perfect. The more you explain stuff, the more threads you give the audience to pull. And suddenly these plot holes can start to appear.
Yes.
And these cracks can start to appear. And I genuinely believe Inception doesn't have a single crack in it. Because he walks that tightrope so well of giving us what we need and giving us and not giving us what we don't need. You don't need to know how this machine works. You don't need to know. So just, we're not even going to explain that. You don't need to know how Elliot Page's architecture is going to translate into DiCaprio's brain. You don't need to know any of that. So let's just go with the stuff you do care about, which is a man trying to overcome the death of his wife, a man, you know, trying to come to terms with his relationship with his father.
Yes.
And so on and so forth. Yeah. So I think it's a masterful film. I think it's absolutely, and one of my favorite lines of all time is in that film, which is Killian Murphy saying to his father, I'm sorry, I know you're disappointed. And the father keeps saying, I'm disappointed. And he keeps saying, I know that. I know you're disappointed. I couldn't be like you. And then his father says, I'm disappointed you tried. And the music hits, and man, if you don't have that catharsis after that scene, then you're made of stone. It is incredible. Yeah. And then, you know, that doesn't even go into the technical accomplishments of that film either. It's
I think the scene that actually stands out for me, I think where Joseph Levitt actually was fighting inside that hotel room, and they were flipping, and I saw the behind the scene and how they were building that thing, and they were just flipping it. Oh man, that was
rotating sets, yeah.
Yeah, it was
It's
just amazing. And that scene itself, it shows so much about what happened in the real world will affect your dream as well. So it's like, yeah, I like how that kind of concept also applies, not just in your dream, but also from the outside world.
I want to talk about The Dark Knight Rises and Tenet because I do think these are his two missteps. Um, I think The Dark Knight Rises, and I have to say, I love the Dark Knight trilogy. We will be talking about these more in the coming weeks because of the new Batman film is out as well, and we're going to be doing a review about that this week. The Dark Knight Rises, for me, I think is a train wreck from start to finish. And I know that sounds extreme. I really don't like that film. It's the one Nolan film, excuse me, it's the one Nolan film I cannot get behind anymore. I don't, and I think my problem with that film is that every single scene on its own is cool. The opening hijacking of the CIA jet, just everything, it's just incredible, right? But when you actually stitch the whole story together, none of it really makes sense in context to other scenes. And it is really just all spectacle with very little real meaningful depth. Now, there are some beautiful moments. I think the end of the film when Batman reveals himself to Gordon by not by saying I'm Bruce Wayne, but by saying, sometimes a hero can just simply be somebody who comforts, a 10-year-old boy and makes him realize that, his whole world hasn't really ended, or, whatever the expression is they use, whatever the phrasing is, and you see the flash of young Jim Gordon putting his jacket around Bruce Wayne as a kid, and it's and Gordon figures out for himself. I think that's a beautiful moment. But I do think there are some very egregious kind of plot holes in this film, like the idea of terrorists have hijacked or taken over the Gotham Stock Exchange and shorted all the stocks on Wayne Enterprises, and then later Morgan Freeman's character says, "Well, we may be able to prove fraud long term, but for now, you've got nothing." And it's like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how the world works. Okay, if terrorists hijacked the New York Stock Exchange tomorrow and shorted all this and shorted all that, it wouldn't. I don't believe for a second that would be the end of it. Well, okay, Microsoft is out of business now. No, there would be insurance. There would be redundancies in place. It would be acknowledged that this was a terrorist attack. This was not a Bruce Wayne didn't want to short his own stock, didn't make a bad investment. There are witnesses, by the way. It's not like Catwoman snuck into the building at night and did something. Like, they literally hold people hostage, and they may even have killed people. I don't know. There is no way that that would stand. And yet that's such a pivotal moment in the film. That's like the downfall of the Wayne Empire. Bruce Wayne hires, I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but I'll stop soon. But Bruce Wayne hands control over the company to the daughter of Ra's al Ghul. He's supposed to be the world's greatest detective. That doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. That doesn't make sense that you would hand over control of Wayne Enterprises. We're not talking about selling a few shares here. We're talking about giving over complete control of Wayne Enterprises to the daughter of your arch nemesis.
Yes.
And you never knew that? Like, you didn't do your background research or anything like that? And I know, yes, she's probably covered her tracks well, but you're the world's greatest detective. There's so much of that stuff in this film, and I'm only just scratching the surface. Tenet as well, I think, has its issues. But to me, the problem with Tenet is that I feel Tenet needed a bit more time to allow certain aspects of it to make more sense. There are aspects of Tenet that don't fully make sense, and it's a long film, but I actually think it needed to be longer. Okay. And it's very rare that I say that, but I think if it had been longer, you could have had more moments that would have helped make certain things clearer.
Yeah.
And then I'd be fine with it. But I have a feeling that what happened was the studios, or maybe even, the producers or whoever, just kind of said, this is probably a bit too long.
Yes,
and we need
I
to trim
think
it
so.
back a little bit. So that, I mean, those are my feelings on Nolan's kind of missteps. I mean, what do you feel? Where do you feel Nolan kind of falls down as a filmmaker? You know,
For me, I think it's Tenet is also it didn't really win a lot of awards in terms of storytelling or even directed. Well, won only for special effects. You know that that's never been done with other films for Nolan. Usually, it's the best screenplay, best directing, best acting. But this one, the only thing that it actually won is just the best special effects. Yes, the special effects was perfect. They were just unique, um, but the way it's been done, it's just I don't know. It's just the story wise and the character weren't really clicking too much, and they were working on just the name of the film. Tenet is like the code kind of secret word that will make you pop up. It's like the kick in Inception, but that doesn't really resemble anything from the Inception kind of breakthrough. Um, I think with all the Dark Knight, with the Batman trilogy, with the Nolan, he never took on Batman as a detective. He took him as just a superhero or a hero. Uh, but he never went too deep with the detective. Although everything he's doing is based on a noir films, but for this one, he didn't really got into it. I think with the new Batman, what we're going to talk about later on, is it's much more depth in terms of being a detective story.
I think the Dark Knight does fall into the detective category a bit more. It is very much trying to get to the bottom of. He's working with the police. It's a much. It feels more of a partnership with Gordon. It's almost like it's the buddy cop superhero
Yes.
movie,
Yeah, yeah.
in a kind of a weird way. But I know what you mean. Yeah, he rarely he doesn't lean into it too heavily, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do think that Nolan is guilty, and maybe I don't know if it's John Nolan or Christopher Nolan or whoever is responsible, but I do think they are guilty of um, tolerating plot holes that are very glaring sometimes. In The Dark Knight, Gordon fakes his death, makes no sense because there are people who believe he's dead and they're leaning over his body. And the whole way around, I get why he wants to fake his death to protect his family, but it doesn't make sense given the context of how it happens. You couldn't have, like, if Gordon knew that the Joker was going to be there in the front row with a rifle to assassinate the other commissioner or whoever, or the mayor or whoever, and no, it was the mayor he was trying to assassinate. So, like, you either know he's there, in which case you're using this to put the mayor at risk so you can fake your own death, or you don't know he's there, in which case, fine, you're not doing anything wrong. But now you're very quickly, like, there's a scene where, his partner kneels down before him and kind of like bows his head because he realizes he's dead. Is Gordon there saying, "Hey, buddy, pretend I'm dead. Just, pretend I'm dead. Start crying. Like, I've got a plan. Just go with it." And it's like he's just coming up on the spot, which is stupid. So there are moments like that where there's a much easier way of doing it, which is just Gordon says, "Look, I'm resigning. I'm leaving the force. I'm out of here. I'm going to move. I'm bringing the family up to my brother's house upstate. We got to get away from all this." And then it turns out, actually, no, I'm back. There's a simple explanation there, but instead he has to go the convoluted route of faking his death. I don't hate it, but it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Dark Knight Rises is loaded with that stuff as well. Tenet has a few little moments like that. And again, it's why I think Inception is his masterpiece, because I can't think of any plot hole in Inception, and I've watched that film a lot. So yeah, I do think they are guilty of just kind of tolerating plot holes without really trying to fix them or putting much effort into trying to kind of work around them, when the solutions could be very, very easy, actually. Like I said before, why is Bane going in there to do this big terrorist attack in public on the New York or on the Gotham Stock Exchange, and when there's all the witnesses in the world to know Bruce Wayne didn't actually do this. When you've got a cat burglar who could go in and do it for you, and then everybody would think Bruce. There's just that. It's almost like a misuse of the ingredients that you yourself have brought to the dinner.
Yeah.
So
I think it drags also so much because it is The Dark Knight Rises, but it took so long to get Batman in the game. It took so long. I mean, almost 50 minutes goes without even seeing. Bruce Wayne is already have a broken back. Yeah, I know the classic story from the comics that Bane is the one who broke Bruce's, Batman's back, but don't let him take so much time to get back on his knees, on his feet, because yeah, we saw what is going to happen, for the rich and what's going to happen in terms of destruction and what kind of chaos and all that. You can, sum it up in 10 minutes. You don't need 50 or 60 minutes to get into, I don't know. It's just,
it does drag.
It drags with that. And if you're planning to have like a fourth film where Joseph Levitt will be the next Batman, yeah, that makes sense, because in the end he gives him all the GPS coordinates, and he goes and he he sees the Bat Cave, and we see him rising up. That means that, okay, he is going to be the next, but there's nothing. So what's really going on is just to drag too much without a further film that service that kind of drag.
Yeah. I mean, I was glad they didn't do more. I was glad. I think I was apprehensive, actually, that we were just going to drag out the story a bit more. But it's just the fact that it's almost 3 hours with, or 2 hours, 45 minutes, whatever it is, with just very little real soul to it. And it did feel like, I've never bought into the idea when people say, oh, I didn't really plan on a sequel. When Nolan, when they wrote in that whole bit, David Goyer as well, when they wrote in that stuff at the end of Batman Begins about the Joker, you're thinking, yeah, you're doing this because, yeah, you want to do a Joker film. And it's fine. There's no shame in that. And they're saying, well, we didn't really know if we were going to get a sequel. Okay, that's fine. But you wrote it hoping that, I mean, nobody's making a Batman movie hoping it's the only movie they ever make, And when they did The Dark Knight, they started talking about how, I think Nolan said, oh, I never really planned on doing a third one. That was it. And at the time I thought, no, I don't believe you for a second. But after watching The Dark Knight Rises, I do think, yeah, he probably did want to leave after the second one, because it does feel like his, and I love Nolan's films, don't get me wrong. I'm so excited about Oppenheimer and everything. Like, I got so giddy when I just saw the poster of Killian Murphy. Like, I mean, that just speaks volumes, right? But yeah, I was like, yeah, it does seem like you didn't really want to do that film. Just very quickly before we kind of start, Dunkirk, I think, doesn't get enough praise. It's brilliantly tense throughout. My experience of watching that in the cinema was very tough, actually. I was in a crowded cinema, didn't have any cup holders, so I had to hold my popcorn and my Coke in my hand. And then it was deafening, and there wasn't enough space to like put anything in front of me. And so I was just holding it like this. And it was deafening sound because it's such a loud film. Nolan's films are always very loud. I couldn't cover my ears. And there were people in the movie theater covering their ears. And I couldn't cover my ears. And it was just torture watching this film for 2 hours. Or not for 2 hours, actually. It was 1 hour and 40 minutes, actually. It's his shortest film. And yet it's the film that actually, if any of his films warranted a really long running time, it's Dunkirk, because this is about a week. This is about a group of people trying to survive a week on a beach waiting to be rescued, as planes are flying overhead shooting at them, as snipers are picking them off from the nearby town. This is like, the enemy is closing in, the enemy is picking us off, the water is unforgiving, and we're just stuck here trying to survive. If any film needed to be longer in order to fully capture that full emotional trauma of that experience, you would think this would be the one, right? And actually, through the structure of the film, he accomplishes it perfectly in an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, this film feels like you were there on the beach with them for a full week. And you can feel the tension of, Tom Hardy's plane running out of fuel. You can feel the tension of the Killian Murphy's PTSD stricken character on the boat, on the pleasure boat, as they're trying to make their way to Dunkirk to rescue people. And it's just magnificent. What did you think of Dunkirk?
I really enjoyed watching it, and I think one of the most important thing is about there's a lot of time where there's no dialogue, and you just see the scenery and and the the scenes, and everything is just telling you everything. There's no need for dialogue, and I love that. And it's very. I think it's very uncommon to see. I think it's like what you say. This is also his first film where there's less dialogue than any other films that he did before, and he's more about the experience that those men had on the beach and getting that rescue. And I think it's just beautiful in terms of also having a true story. He built on a true story for the events and what happened in the war, but also he never bought into bringing so many A-listers, just a couple just to get the funding, I think. Then everyone else is just, nobody actually saw them act before that. So,
yeah, and it's this is the film, I think, where the DNA of Nolan's films revealed itself. Time is what the Nolan brothers do better than anybody else. It's not spectacle, it's time. The way they play with time is magnificent. And, I'm a firm believer, no film needs to be more than 2 hours. If you can't tell your story in 2 hours, there's a problem. I've always believed that. It's a controversial opinion. I know there are so many great films out there. Could you do Lord of the Rings in less than 2 hours? Probably not. So it's probably not a foolproof argument. But I do think for the most part, most stories can be told in 2 hours or less. And I think Dunkirk is the proof that if you use a clever structure, if you do that whole coming in late kind of approach to stories sometimes, if you think about using time as a structural device in your movie, you can accomplish so much in a smaller time. And I actually think you can learn more about how to write a short film from watching Dunkirk than you can from watching a feature film, because of that brilliant use of 1 hour. One week, 1 day, 1 hour. And what's so funny is I'd always thought about doing a kind of a boat lift story like that, and I could never figure out how do you do it in a way where it's not just characters going back and forth, from the perspective of the sailors, and Dunkirk did it. I watched Dunkirk and I just thought, yep, that's it. I'm not going to bother writing that story now, because this is it. This is like, and this was a different boat lift story, but it wasn't Dunkirk. But I just thought there's no point, because that's the structure I needed, and he's done that now. And anything.
I think the same structure he used at Interstellar. 1 hour or 1 minute equals 1 hour, something like that.
He does that. He does that in Interstellar. Yeah, so there's a planet with a gravitational pull on it, and it's an hour down there is like 20 years or something up on the space station, which is haunting, actually, when you think about that out loud. The amount of time that would have passed. I want to save Interstellar for another day, because Michaela's talked so much, has done a lot of research about Interstellar, and has spoken with the people involved as well, and she's got a lot of real value, a lot of cool stories to tell. So we want to get her in on that talk. And we'll do his different movies independently and their own videos as well. But I do think, you talked about science and the kind of scientific principles underpinning a lot of his stuff. Christopher Nolan is a scientist, I think, at his heart, and he loves science, and you can tell, and I'm sure John and Nolan as well. But you can tell that he researches on science, he reads about science, and this is a nice way to kind of segue into Oppenheimer. This is probably going to be if The Prestige is his is what I feel to be his most personal film, because of the idea of that coming together of science and magic, being representative of what film is. Film is that combination of illusion and scientific principles coming together and being presented on the screen. Oppenheimer must be his second most personal film, almost. I don't know. Maybe Interstellar is also very personal because of his love for science and that as well. But if he loves science, then Oppenheimer must be just a dream to make. This is the man who invented the atomic bomb. This is a man who, if I'm not mistaken, took his own life afterwards because of it. I'm not 100% certain on that, so don't quote me. But there's so much I think that Nolan can do brilliantly here. And I have been trying to think of like what's going to be what's the attraction here to this story? Because, can you do the nonlinear structure in a story like this? Can you do obviously you're going to have the spectacle of an atomic blast, right? Imagine what an atomic blast will look like in a Nolan film. And I'm not talking about that stupid little thing at the end of Dark Knight Rises. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about this is the most devastating, destructive force man has ever created. And this will scare countries into surrendering.
Yes.
In World War II. And we're going to get to see the visual spectacle of that in all of its horror, in all of its destructive force, and all of its awesomeness in that literal sense of the word, on a big screen, on an IMAX screen, under Nolan's direction. I mean, that just excites the hell out of me. I hope they don't give that away in the trailer.
I hope so. Yeah.
I really hope they don't, because I feel like there'll be a temptation to, because, well, who is this guy? Why should we care? For most people, it's, well, why should I care? Oh, it's a Nolan film. Okay, fine. But why should I care? Well, actually, he did this thing. Look at this thing he did. So I do think there's going to be a huge temptation to reveal that in the trailer. I hope they don't. But I am very interested to kind of see what they'll do story-wise. What do you have any kind of thoughts on that?
I think it's much more about the moral. It's a struggle of morals and morality, and how can you actually live with the death of millions of people, and how you create this devilish kind of device where you can wipe people from the face of the earth in just in one shot. So I think it's much more about. It's similar, I think, like what you say, and connect. I'm really with you in terms of. The Prestige. It's also about morals. If we go to it's also about morals. How can you deceive people, and believing things? And I think this is where also a lot of morals will be in the character himself. So it's a character study more than a story study this time. So
I am interested to see how Nolan's use of time will make its way into this film. I'm interested to see how. There's always some sort of little structural paradigm shift that he puts into his movies, and I'm interested just to see how that will work its way in. I can't see on the surface how, but I think that's the genius of him. Yeah, I'm very excited about this film. Very excited to see what happens with this, and great to see Killian Murphy getting his leading role in a. Not that he's ever had problems getting starring roles in movies, but I think we've talked about Nolan. Constantly going back to that talent that he really admires and that he really enjoys working with. It speaks volumes about how how talented Killian Murphy is as an actor, actually. And maybe this is the one that gets him his Oscar nomination.
Yes, maybe, I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah,
I think he changed so much after Peaky Blinders. It kind of sharpened him more. I know he's a professional, but I think a lot of his skills came out with the Peaky Blinders. And for me, I respected him more after that, although he started in the 28 days later, but I think this one will be much more about him being the lead role and having a lot of time on screen than any other films he did.
I've always been fascinated by Killian Murphy's career, because when I was he's from Cork. He's, where I'm from in Ireland, and finding out when I was a teenager or, late teens, that this guy from Cork could be it could be the next Batman because he auditioned for Batman, and that
Yes.
he's going to be the new Batman villain. It just, blew me away. I was jealous because I was trying to, like, I had all these dreams of making a name for myself as well in the industry, and so I was like so jealous that somebody from Cork actually like has made it like to Batman levels. I just thought that was the most amazing thing. And yeah, seeing him crop, like, he delivers one of my favorite moments in all of cinema. That scene in Inception I told you about. He's the best thing in Dunkirk, I think, and no disrespect to anybody in that film, but he is very, very powerful in that film. And yeah, the idea of him being, and I've been watching Peaky Blinders lately, so like I'm all in for him and his talents as an actor. So I can't wait to see what he does in Oppenheimer. Like, I really can't wait to see what he's able to deliver on that front.
Me as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see it. Yeah.
The minute a trailer drops, we'll start doing we'll do an analysis on it. We'll do a video discussion on it.
Sure.
Any final thoughts, Asim?
I think we should just. I like people to understand that there's always this kind of collaboration between a writer, or let's say screenwriter, and director, and if they work so entwined and in a one momentum, I think they actually produce something very spectacular about the stories and the character, and also the world that they're creating and how to shoot it as well. So I think it's a combination. No one can actually work by himself. So I think that's
No,
the bottom line for me.
That is very true. And we did a discussion on Nightmare Alley, which should be up now, and I made a point to say, we shouldn't. It's not just Del Toro; it's Kim Morgan as well, which I believe is his partner in life as well. And you can tell that the two of them are probably completely in sync with each other. Living together, as a couple. And you can and that comes through on the screen entirely. There is that total synchronized vision. I think when I see that as well with the Nolan brothers. I never feel like I can tell, oh, that's a Jonathan Nolan moment or that's a Christopher Nolan moment. I think they're completely in sync. I think, I've always looked at Lucas and Spielberg as almost kind of like brothers because they're best friends, and, they kind of rose up together. And they clearly had such a hand in each other's development career-wise, but also they've collaborated on so many projects together as well. But I can always tell when I'm watching Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, for example, when it's a George Lucas idea and when it's a Spielberg idea. I can always tell in these movies when it's Spielberg, when it's Lucas. I don't think they're. I think their individuality comes through. And I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way. But I think the Nolans are almost like one super filmmaker,
Yes.
Yeah. And we haven't even talked about Westworld. We'll save Westworld for another day, I think, because that's
just another level we have to.
And that's how I sell it to people. If people say, I wasn't quite sure about watching Westworld, I'm like, if you like Christopher Nolan, just watch Westworld because it's like Christopher Nolan did a TV show. Yeah. So and I think the one other final point I think as well is worth mentioning is how brilliant he is at genre.
Yes.
Superhero movies, heist movies in the form of Inception, space, science fiction, war, and now he's doing a biopic. This is a film, and procedural investigation in Memento. This is a guy who's not afraid to tackle any genre. What does a romance film look like? These are things we won't get into now for purpose of time. What does a Nolan romance film look like? What does a Nolan horror film look like? These are things that. What does a Nolan political thriller look like? And Tenet is like an espionage film as well. So he ticks so many boxes. A guy who really loves James Bond films as well. You can see the influence of James Bond everywhere. In Inception, in Tenet, and what would a James Bond Nolan film look like? And I wonder, have the Broccoli's reached out to, has Barbara Broccoli and Eon reached out to Nolan in the past to say, or even Jonathan Nolan to write a Bond film? I don't know.
Wow, that will be just another way to see his his creativity.
Would a Nolan Bond film break all box office records? I think it might. I think it
I
could.
think, yeah, but the point is, it shouldn't be similar to Tenet or something like
Oh yeah,
that.
no, no, no,
If
no, no.
it becomes as a scale of Inception or The Prestige, I think, man, that will be, or The Dark Knight, not The Dark Knight Rises, not The Dark Knight. Then believe it will be something more than what we think about, and we will see James Bond in a different eye spectrum.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
think
think
that
so. Yeah.
it's
Thanks
a
very much.
dream,
I know.
just
Yeah,
a
it's a
dream.
dream. It's a dream. I know. But oh, yeah, one can dream. Thanks very much, Asim.
Thank you.
And thanks very much for listening, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow with another video. In the meantime, do check out our website, thescriptdepartment.net. Hit us up on social media. Links are in the description. Subscribe to the podcast, The Script Department, wherever you get your podcasts. Give the video a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel too. Thanks very much.